Right, here we are. And I want to make a few announcements at the beginning of this video, especially for those that watch later who didn't hear everything I said. There was supposed to be a Bible test today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? You need to know those verses. Isaiah 53.
7 through 12.
Yeah, 7 through 12. When you come back, you need to know them. So I guess you just have a little longer to learn them. And spelling list 13. We will start spelling list 13. So you have your spelling book. You can start studying those words. Okay? Science. We're going to finish the chapter about water. Okay.
Oh, I already did my homework for the science.
Good. That's the first thing we'll do after the announcements. Yes. So just know to finish that, and there's probably going to be a test later on when we come back. History. We're going to read to page 142 and the rest of the chapter checkup, numbers 11 through 17 on page 145 is what you should do. And there's also a map skill sheet, number 12, that we should do. And I will send all this to your parents, but you'll already know, okay, if you watch this video. All right. So we're going to hop right into science. You may or may not have your book. Well, you should have that book, shouldn't you?
What book?
You
Science?
You should have science because we had homework. So let's go over the homework. Are you ready?
Yes. Oh, wait. Can I grab my book out my bag?
Yes, quickly.
Okay.
Now I'm going to go ahead and read the first question while and maybe he'll be back by the time I finish it. Number 1, comprehension check 5.10 on page 123 says, there is always water blank in the air. There's always water what in the air?
Vapor.
Good job. Vapor, water vapor in the air. Number 2,
I need a pencil.
warm, moist air is blank, then cool air. We went over this yesterday, didn't we? What's the answer, Caitlin? It's what?
Lighter.
Lighter than cool air. The warm air goes up. Number 3, as it rises away from the Earth's surface, warm air begins to cool, right?
Mr. Doyle,
Cool as it goes away.
I have to grab my pencil because I don't know where it is.
Okay, if you need to do something, then just do it. And
Okay. I don't know where it is. Oh, my mom's gonna get it.
Number 4, cool air cannot hold as much what as warm air?
Water vapor.
Cool air cannot hold as much water vapor. That's right, as warm air. That's why it's.
Can you say number 1 again? Because I got it wrong.
It was vapor.
Okay.
Water vapor. Okay.
Okay.
So we're on number 4 now. Oh yeah, we said that it cannot hold as much water vapor. That's why there's a lot more humidity often in the summertime, because it can hold more moisture. Warm air can. Number 5, when water vapor is in the air cools and turns into tiny droplets of liquid water, what takes place?
Condensation.
Condensation, that's correct. Condensation takes place. You're going to do such a good job on any quiz or test, aren't you? Number 6, water in the air condenses on tiny pieces of what?
Dust particles.
Yes, dust in the air. Okay. Number 7, 4 kinds of precipitation are
Hail,
okay.
snow, and rain.
Yes. I'll say them again. Rain is one. sleet, snow, hail or hailstones. Number 8, water vapor that condenses on the grass at night is called what, Caitlin?
Dew.
Dew is right. Dew. Number 9, last one. Tiny crystals of ice that are made of frozen water vapor are, yes,
Hailstones. Frost.
Emma, you are correct.
Ah.
It's actually frost. It's tiny crystals made up of water vapor. You'll see that on your window. You'll see that on the grass and other places. Okay. All right, that was the homework. Look at page 127. 127.
Okay.
There's a few more pages in this chapter. And so you will read these pages 127 through 129, okay? Now let's talk about a few of the things ahead, and then when you read it, it'll make even more sense to you, okay? On page 127, there's a bold term about a scientist who studies the weather, and they come on TV too. Do you know what they're called?
Yes.
What's it called? If you look in your book, you can see it. What are they called?
I don't need to look at my book because I already know what it is.
All
It's
right,
a meteorologist.
Say it again.
Meteorologist.
Absolutely right. Good job. So a meteorologist, maybe you can learn how to spell that word. You will highlight that word on page 127, okay? And a meteorologist, a scientist who studies the weather. They study all kinds of things and they try to predict and make forecasts of what will happen, what weather may be coming. They have instruments that measure things in the atmosphere. There's also a term called air mass. An air mass, at the bottom of page 127 says, is a large body of air which has the same temperature and humidity. And we learn what humidity is, the moisture in the air, right?
Yes.
So you need to know that term too. There are different air masses. So look at me, there's this big air mass over here, maybe. There's another air mass over here, and they all have the same temperature and humidity. But this one over here might have a different one than this one over here. This air mass might have a different temperature and humidity. So when they all are together with the same, it's called an air mass. Air masses in the United States and in southern Canada move from west to east. So think about that. They tend to move from the west to the east. So like weather in California comes to the middle of the United States, then it comes to the East Coast often. Well, each hour meteorologists measure 5 different things. On page 127, you'll see those 5 different things. Can anyone find it? What 5 things? What 5 things? Well, I'll tell you then. Look on page 127 at the top, right side. Emma?
Temperature, air
Good,
pressure, humidity, precipitation, and wind speed.
good. And you can highlight those 5 things. In other words, they're measuring what temperature it is today, right? Meteorologists also measure the air pressure, how much pressure is in the air. They also, yeah, I'm going to mute for just a second. Okay? Also, okay. Also, they're going to measure humidity, how much moisture is in the air, right? And then precipitation, if there's precipitation in the air, if it's going to rain, right? Is it going to snow? And then the wind speed, how fast is the air moving that's coming? And that's what we have there. So some weather stations, they have like these balloons that go up and measure things in the air. And then as it rises higher into the air, in the atmosphere, it pops. The equipment on the board, the balloon, parachutes back to Earth. And airplane pilots also report weather by radio, and ships at sea send weather reports regularly to the station. Pretty interesting, isn't it? They have all these things going all over. And if you want to say something, just tell me.
I need to get my science book.
Yes, that would be good.
Okay, hold on, I'll get it.
So these are different methods, and you might want to highlight that. What different methods do meteorologists use to gather information? Well, here's one down at the bottom of page 127. It says they use balloons, ships, planes, satellites. They're used by meteorologists to make accurate observations of the condition of the air.
What page?
127. 127.
Okay.
We're about to go to 128 though. Okay.
Okay.
Then on page, let's go there on page 128. And again, we're not reading everything because we're going to talk about something else too. Oh, they talk about predicting weather. What do they think it's going to do? Based on patterns in the past, they can make predictions on what it might happen now. Patterns of air currents and things like that. So they, for example, it rained 6 out of 10 days with similar weather conditions. The meteorologists will predict that there is a 60% chance of rain. Because with similar weather patterns, it happened about 6 times out of 10 that happened. So the more they predict, the more data they have to make more predictions of what might happen. They continually update it. So there are 2 kinds of forecasts. Are you ready? One is called a short range forecast. A short range forecast is anywhere between 18 to 36 hours in advance of it happening. So there's 24 hours in a day, right? So it's maybe less than a day to a little more than a day, right? And that's called a short-term forecast. There's also a long range or extended forecast. Have you ever seen on the news, the weather? They'll give you 5 days, right? Maybe they'll give you a whole week. You can even see 2 weeks. But the longer range forecasts are not as accurate, are they? The further out you go, the less accurate it tends to be, right? Because it's way out there. It could maybe move, that cloud might move a little differently, right, than they thought. The closer it is to our time, the more accurate, because it's only a few hours away. It's probably more likely to happen. You see? So you should highlight short range forecast on page 128 on the left, and long range or extended forecast, and read about those and know what they are. Okay. Question. What are meteorologists? What are meteorologists? Emma? Do you know? You can unmute yourself now.
They tell about the weather.
They sure do. They tell about the weather. They are scientists who study the weather. And what is an air mass, Caitlin? What is an air mass?
It's a large body of air which has the same temperature of and humidity.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly right. Right in your book, you can look at what you highlighted and get the answer for that one. Number 3, what conditions of an air mass are measured by a meteorologist? Remember when I said that there were 5 things that they measure? So when I say what conditions, that's what I want. Caitlin?
Temperature, air pressure, humidity, precipitation, and wind speed.
Exactly, exactly. Good job. And number 4 on the questions on page 128 says, "What are 2 different ways meteorologists measure conditions in the upper atmosphere?" And of course, there were more than 2 ways, but you can say 2 ways. Joseph, I haven't heard from you. Can you tell me? You have it? I can't even see you. Do you know? Emma, do you know? All right, Caitlin, what is it?
Balloon ships, plant, and satellites.
Yes, I'm going to say it again. Balloons, ships, planes, and satellites. It asks you for 2, but there are more than 2. Number 5, why is a short range forecast more reliable than an extended forecast? Someone else tell me why. Why? And I mentioned it just a few minutes ago. Why? All right. Here's the reason why. And find this in your book when you read it. Short range forecasts are based on current information, and long range forecasts are based on normal weather patterns. So let's think about that. Long range is just based on a pattern that they've seen in the past. Short range is based on actual information they've gathered, very, well, it's current. It's like now, it's happening now. It's close at hand. It's going to be more accurate, isn't it? It's actually information they were able to gather from these instruments. Whereas long range, it's just based on weather patterns. So it's going to be more accurate. The short range. Any question there? All right, guess what? I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to do a little bit of history with you too, okay? Tell you a little bit about history. So I hope you have your history book nearby too.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes,
my mom has my books, but she has them at her work.
that's fine.
I don't have my books right now.
That's all right. I'm glad you're here though. You can still listen, right? And maybe later your books will come and you'll be able to use the book to do whatever it is we need to do. Caitlin's holding up her book. And of course, you didn't know that this was going to happen. So on page 137 in your history book, if you have it, we're going to do it like science. We might run out of time. And if we run out of time, I will send you what pages, a message about what pages, but we're going to be looking at page 137 and go all the way to page 142. I know that's more pages, but you'll have time to read. You can just read, okay? Just read and learn the things. If you see a bold term, focus on that, and then we'll have to review it again when we come back, okay? Well, the Louisiana Purchase was purchased by which president of the United States, Emma?
Thomas Jefferson.
Excellent, good job. And what 2 young men led an expedition to explore the Louisiana Territory? Someone else? Who remembers from class? All right, Emma, tell us.
Lewis and Meriwether Clark. Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark. It was actually Meriwether Lewis and what was it? William Clark. Yes. Two guys, two men journeyed. In fact, if you were listening to the language time today, we actually talked a bit. I just mentioned it a little bit there too, didn't I? So make sure you know who they are. I'm getting background noise. Who's doing that? You might have to mute yourself unless you're going to say something. There we go. What city was burned during the War of 1812? Someone can unmute themselves and tell me. Joseph?
It is the White House
And where is that?
in Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. is correct. Yes, it was the White House. Who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner during, or actually there's two questions here I'm looking at. Who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner? That's the first one, Caitlin.
Francis Scott Key.
Excellent job. Remember his name from last time in class. And then the second part of that question is, during what battle? What was the name of this battle? Yes,
I
Emma?
know.
Oh, you know, Joseph? What?
Oh, she can answer it. She can answer it.
Do you know it, Emma? What is it? One of you.
War of 1812.
That was the war. And then there was the battle. And all those
Fort
bombs.
McHenry.
Say it again.
Fort McHenry.
Good job. Excellent. The Battle of Fort McHenry. That was the battle where Francis Scott Key was there. The bombs were bursting in air. The rocket's red glare, where we get the words of our Star-Spangled Banner. It's a really interesting story, isn't it, of what happened. And now we're going to go on. After the War of 1812, if you look on page 137, something else happens. Remember our map? Look. If I can find it. I moved some stuff around. I moved it because I put something else there. And I'm going to move this. Remember this map? Guess what? There's the Louisiana Purchase. And look. I have that. Does that look right? Oh, I've got to move it over here so you can see it better. Look, Florida, the United States, after the War of 1812, starts looking down south and they see what Juan Ponce de Leon explored way back in an earlier chapter. What is it? What is it? It's Florida. Look, can you see that? And that's what we're going to look at. The United States actually purchases Florida. Now remember, the Spanish are down there. Remember the first settlement, St. Augustine, way down there in Florida? And so it belonged to Spain, but Spain did not rule Florida very well. As I'm looking in my book here on 137, so all these people were breaking the law and people were dying, and oh, there was very little to stop them. And there were Native Americans down there, Native American Indians down there, and there are little mini wars going on down there and everything. And so there was no control to stop all this stuff from happening. And so the border of Georgia and Florida, there was a lot of crossing over there and settlers being terrorized by some of the groups that were coming up there from the Native American tribes. And there was a lot of burning and killing and other things that were happening in Florida. That doesn't sound like a very safe place to live, does it? And so the United States finally had enough of this. So by then we have another president, and his name is President James Monroe.
What?
President James Monroe. And he offers to buy Spain for $5 million. Now, this money was going to be paid to Spain, okay? I'm sorry, would not be paid to Spain, okay? Why don't you think it would be paid to Spain?
Mr. Doyle,
Yes,
James Monroe was the 5th president of the United States.
good job. So we're working through the presidents, aren't we? As time goes on, you know, now we're there in the story of history. So, but the United States does something differently. We're not going to give it to Spain. We're simply going to pay back all the people that were Georgia, the people that were citizens of Georgia and had property damaged. We're going to pay them with this $5 million. In other words, they're saying, Spain, this money would have gone to you, but you've done so much damage to our country that we're just going to use that money and it's going to be like you paid for it. You understand that? And we're going to pay those people, and now the United States is going to acquire Florida. And Spain accepted that, accepted the offer, sold Florida to the United States in 1819. Pretty interesting, huh? So the United States is starting to look, as your book says, like this jigsaw puzzle, all these little pieces of land. Let me look here, all put together, you know. We're actually over here. And we don't, all this we don't have yet, right, out west. But we have all the way to the Louisiana Purchase and Florida is part of the United States now in our history so far. Well, then something else happens. Do you remember the Great Awakening that we studied? Guess what? There's a second Great Awakening again. And so we're talking about a spiritual awakening of the people in this country. And there was one, and we're not talking about everything. You can go back, you can still read it, okay? But it'll make more sense and be in your mind better when you read it again. There was a Methodist guy that came from England, and his name was Francis Osbury. Now, if you don't recognize that name, I want you to get to where you recognize that name, Francis Osbury, because he did a lot of things. He wrote a lot of things. He learned a lot from John Wesley. And of course, he was doing the one thing that was popular in this time was remember those circuit riding preachers who would go from town to town or from place to place and preach the gospel? Well, he became one of the leaders, a Methodist leader during that time. And he did that in 1771. He spread the gospel and taught many other Methodist preachers to do it. So not only was he helping people, but he was helping others become preachers too. And so the circuit riding preachers, I want you on 137 to highlight Francis Osbury, the guy I was just telling you about, and circuit riding preachers. And what does it say? They regularly would make the same circuit or circle of towns, preaching wherever they went, you know. I want you to imagine a circle. You ready? A circle. And I'm going to go like this. See, I'm going to show you this. Here's all these, so, you know, here's a town here, here's a town here, here's a town here. And maybe this is like a big map. Can you see that? And maybe he started here preaching at this town here. Now, it wouldn't be a perfect circle like this, okay? This is just for an illustration. And then he'd go on his horse, he'd go to the next town. And he'd preach there one Sunday or one weekend. And then by the next time, he'd go to the next town and preach there until he made us all the way back to where he started. And they got to hear him again. This way, lots of people in lots of places could hear the gospel, and because they didn't always have their own preacher to preach for them. And so the circuit riding preachers. Look, one of the best circuit riding preachers was another man whose name was Peter Cartwright. Peter Cartwright. Now, here's what's great about his name. Every year, a lot of children forget his name. So I want you to think of a cart that has wheels on it, right? You know, the old carts that horses would pull, right? You know what I'm talking about? Well, he's going to hold these reins, and this is going to be a funny little drawing because it's going to look really bad, you know? And it's going to look like a, here's the horse and his mane that I'm drawing really quick. And look, I want you to pretend that Peter Cartwright has his Bible and he's on this funny little cart. You see that? And here's his horse. And his name is Peter. And he probably had a hat though. And his name was Peter Cartwright. Here's the little cart, you know. And obviously it would have more than that. It's silly, isn't it? But maybe it'll help you remember. Here's Peter on his cart. He was a cartwright, and he's going to go to the next place and preach. Oh, he was a Methodist preacher. He felt God had called him to preach. And so while all these preachers, these Methodist circuit riding preachers, many of them Methodists, this revival broke out among the people as they were traveling all around. And in Kentucky territory, you know, where Daniel Boone had opened up to settlers, and other places, moved up to the Northwest territory. So many peoples were converted under the preaching of Baptist preachers, Methodist preachers, Presbyterian evangelists, and all the way in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. There's a whole list of in your book of places that they went preaching, and people were awakened to spiritual things and wanted the Lord Jesus in their lives and wanted God in their lives. And so they loved and they wanted to see people come to Christ and come to God. And look, there were these camp meetings. That's something else that happened. And so these camp meetings were held at night often, and people would camp out for a while, sleep in, come to these tents, and they were here preaching there. They gather for a whole solid week of preaching and just stay there, camp out, talk to each other, share what God's doing in their lives. Or maybe there were people that didn't really know God, and they came and they learned to know God and repented and came to God and believed God. Amazing thing, huh? So you also need to highlight camp meetings. It's where these spiritual revival often took place, all around, from everywhere and every state around. They traveled many miles because they lived so far apart from each other, and they could all meet there and have this spiritual refreshing or spiritual birth if they didn't know. But it was often for the ones that knew God, but they were coming back, being awakened again, maybe getting right with God once again. They look on page 139. We're going to run out of time, but you're going to actually read about what happens in Mexico. What an exciting story that is. Have you heard of Santa Anna, who took control of Mexico? Remember that name? And the Alamo. You're going to read about the Alamo too, okay? Of these 187 men who came, and one of the most famous ones that fought to help fight against them because they claimed Texas as part of the United States, but then the Mexicans were also claiming it. One of the most famous men was who?
I know.
Who?
Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett was the one that,
Oh.
yeah, Daniel Boone was earlier, but earlier we talked about Daniel Boone, but Davy Crockett, you need to know his name. And they actually risked their lives defending this Alamo. You can actually see a picture of it in your book. It's still there. You can still visit it, where they ran out of ammunition for one thing, but they were willing to die for the freedom of America and say, we are Texans. We were here all this time. And so, you can read all about, there's quite a bit of a story there about Davy Crockett and the brave Americans that meet their death at the Alamo, and they risk their whole life, everything, saying, we're going to fight for our country. This is part of our country. We've been out here living all this time, even though it wasn't an actual official state yet. There are people out there living there. And so that is what happened. If we get cut off, just know to read to page 142, okay? And there was also a man named General Sam Houston, who took the Mexican army by surprise in the Battle of San Jacinto. Did I say that right, Joseph?
Say it again.
San Jacinto.
Yeah, I think you said it right.
All right. Why don't you say it?
I think it's the right way that you did say it, though.
Good.
It is
Good.
San Jacinto.
Very good. I like to hear you say it in that nice way of saying Spanish words. Well, the cry that everyone kept crying was, remember the Alamo, remember the Alamo. And it spurred people on. Hey, we may have lost lives there, but we are not quitting as a nation. When we go on with the other battles in this war with Mexico, war with Mexico and the United States, they're saying, look, remember the Alamo, remember what happened there? And it spurred them on. Hey, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep fighting for what we believe and protecting our country and believing in our country. And Texas remained independent until 1845. She still wasn't a state yet, but she finally did become the 28th state to join the Union.